Now, what are your thoughts in particular? We had like reports from Polygon.com, a platform discussion, and we also have a Screen Rant conversation on the idea of Marvel's Phase 4 ideas, connections, and setups. Now, one thing in the, I believe it was a Polygon conversation where you had a lot of comic creators speaking on it. There was some interesting concepts on it, but first off, let me know, what do you feel about X-Men in the MCU?
I have no problem with it. I have absolutely no problem with it. I think that the MCU has a great track record. And I also I think that they're starting to experiment a little more with, I think Black Panther was a little more, it dealt with a little more serious issues. Nothing bad. I think they know how to ride the line. But I really don't have a problem with them in the MCU at all. I really don't. And I think that
the MCU as it is.
As it is, I don't have a problem with it. I really don't. I think if you make a good film, you make a good film. And I think that what is going on is, I think that comic book fans are forgetting something. Comic book fans are forgetting that we are a small minority. The most people that go to the Marvel movies are not comic book fans who are buying the books. They like the spectacle. So for them, it's just, oh, wow, I could see the X-Men with the Avengers. It's just a bigger spectacle. I don't have an issue at all with them being in the MCU. If the MCU takes over, if you make a good X-Men film, you make a good X-Men film. That's how I look at it. So I don't get caught up in the, oh my God, I don't want them in the MCU. To me, it doesn't bother me at all. Because guess what? The X-Men movies in Fox were rated PG-13. The ones in the MCU are going to be rated PG-13. Now, all I care about is, do you have the right actors, a good script, and a good director? And if you find the way to have Infinity War Part 5, and you can have the Avengers and the X-Men, like they did in the comics, and you can have that big spectacle scene like you had at the Endgame, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So I truly, that doesn't bother me. Because like I said, I truly believe that comic book fans, you think that those people that make MCU movies $1 billion, most of them are not comic book fans. They learned about Thor through the MCU movies. I can give you a proof. My aunt loves the MCU movies. Loves them. She had tickets to see Infinity War a month before it came out. When we saw Endgame, she called me. She loves the MCU. Never picked up a comic book in her life. Never picked it up. So if you told my aunt, X-Men are joining the MCU, to her, it's more candy in the candy jar. My mother likes some of the Marvel movies. Never read a comic book in her life. It's a spectacle. So that's why when we watch a movie, like for example, I know a lot of people who love Thanos. I saw the Infinity War. Guess what? I can tell you right now, that story was called the Infinity Gauntlet. It was changed around a lot. There was no, I want to send balance to the world. He wanted to impress Lady Death.
All right. But I guess, where I come into it...
Because I'm going off on a tangent. Just for me, it's not a big deal. Like, it doesn't matter to me.
I mean, understood. I mean, I guess for me, my issues with it is that one, just like another YouTuber said, is if you get what you want, it's gonna be less X-Men movies. It's just gonna be a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And less, or that, and less Avengers movies. So either we're going to lead with the X-Men and focus on them, or it's going to be less of that. You got to remember that's a huge universe and everything has to fit right. Then you got Fantastic Four, which to me is a better fit for the MCU. Now, all things being considered, the little boy in me wants to see all of them running around like roaches in the same world. But I want more movies and I want diverse depictions of them. Be honest with you. So I think it would behoove them to have their own separate universe just for X-Men, because there's so many X-Men. There's more X-Men than there are actual really super. Just X-Men and mutants alone. You don't need the MCU with all those characters. My problem with the MCU, X-Men coming out of MCU. And all things considered, you could always write a great script, but I think no matter what script you write, you're going to have to divorce yourself a lot from X-Men lore. What that means is by making them come out now, then you're going to have to explain where they've been at this whole time. You're going to also have to explain where there are already mutants in the world, because we haven't even gotten a hint of them. So unless they're just now coming out, then you have to explain why is Xavier so nice with it when he just discovered his powers. Unless you're going to say he knew his powers the whole time. When did Aurora know how to control control the weather? Did no one notice that in this day and age where we have cell phones and shit? Where you could say they hid like Nightcrawler. Okay. So that means this is the first time people see it. Then you're going to have to go through the beginning stages of it. Now, like I said, it's going to be very muddled. It's going to be very muddled because with the X-Men don't just start from today. They've been here and been around and have been woven throughout the history. My personal issue is you're going to have to divorce yourself a lot from X-Men lore. And you're gonna have to sacrifice the X-Men to force them in a universe that had no support for them, no open end support from them at all, unless you use multiverse. And unless you want to do the multiverse, you're gonna have to make that interesting. Otherwise, if you ask me, I just start a whole new universe where a new segment, X-Men World, where they have their own Feige and they could pump out their own movies out of their studio where they don't have to worry about, well, how do we make that make sense with this old story now? Because now we're saying this guy's here, and like I said, you're going to have to find a way to make it look like they've always been around. And by doing that, you may end up having to pull a lot of shit out your ass or have something that the MCU wasn't known for. Inconsistency.
I think that you are giving the general public a lot deeper than what it is. I think that if they made an excellent movie right now and just inserted them, nobody's going to ask the question where they've been. I don't think nobody's going to ask the question.
Yeah, and again, if I may say, you're going to, if you did that, you'd still sacrifice a lot of the X-Men. So there'll be something else. So it'll just be X-Men in name and brand new everything. And if that's cool, hold on, let me finish. If that is cool, then the question still remains, is that still the X-Men? That's just how I feel about it with that, and you can take your last points on that.
I look at it this way, the same way Sony did it with Spider-Man. The same way we had Andrew Garfield for 2 movies, and within the next 2-3 years, we had what's his name?
That's not the same. You're talking about a complete reboot. That's not the same.
Okay, but again, if you bring in the X-Men, right, and let's say they recasted everyone, right, and you just inserted them and made an X-Men movie, and you just made a mention of Professor X and just a brief conversation, Hey, Professor, who you on the phone with? Yeah, I'm talking to Steve Rogers about something. I think that when you say sacrifice the X-Men lore, what does that mean? I'm asking, what does that mean?
I thought I explained it, so I'll try it
I'm
again.
asking you,
With the X-Men
explain.
and you being a reader, they come with backlogs of history. Where are you gonna start your X-Men from? If you're saying this is the first time mutants came out, then you sacrifice a lot of their back history. That means that you'd have to explain Sinister been around from before. You have Mystique, you could get away with Mystique because she's a shapeshifter. You have Nightcrawler. Where do you begin? Because you had obviously deformations or deformities with these characters. So my thing is, you take away a lot of. If we was to start an X-Men movie, brand new, no MCU, you're polished. You have a brand new slate. So I could say, if I introduce Nightcrawler, there's no, well, how the fuck this blue people walking around and no one there? No, we're starting from here. So if I'm starting from an X-Men movie, yeah, they've always been around in their back history. If you start X-Men, if I was to start X-Men in, let me just say we have actually Hellboy wouldn't lend it. So let's say we just decide to throw mutants into the world of M. Night Shyamalan Split. You'll be like, that kind of convolutes. It wasn't the point of these characters that they were kind of, not too many people even seen people like that. So then that developed their counters, and like remember how it was in what is Unbreakable? Like, you have a hero and his counterpart. It was kind of like this whole balance of life. They have a whole story with a template catered around that did not support mutants. Is there a creative way where you could write them in? Yeah. Could it even be interesting? Yeah. But you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of X-Men lore. Now, for everyone that thinks that this will be the most accurate X-Men, by definition, it could not be. You'd have to sacrifice a lot of X-Men lore to massage them somehow into the MCU, unless you do a whole the multiverse. Then you fold the multiverses together and somehow poof, they ended up into your universe and somehow melded their history into that. And that's just way too much geek shit that's been in the comics. But like you said, there's people that don't read the comics. That shit might convolute the story. Why complicate the MCU already just to force in X-Men and sacrifice the X-Men to force them into the MCU? Albeit, all things considered, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. So I'm sure somebody could find a great way to do it. Anybody possibly can. If you want, I mean, anything is possible. I'm just saying, on paper, you would have to sacrifice unless you do a lot of trickery, and then you still are risking losing your audience that don't read books. I'm just saying. I don't know how. Maybe I'm not communicating it well enough, but I don't know how it's not understood that if X-Men were to just pop up, remember, it's not just X-Men. The concept of mutants, that's what I'm talking about. Like, X-Men is a team. The concept of mutants been around. For you to bring them up, you'd have to say they were in hiding the whole time, which you're going to have to really be like, okay, the Trask, you can't really just have Sentinels. You know what I mean? If they're just popping up, you feel what I'm saying? Like, you lose a lot of lore if you start X-Men, or mutants, I should say, if that makes sense, to be more accurate, to start discovering mutants now. Then you can't have Sentinels in it. You can't. It wouldn't even make sense. Because it'd be like, well, why would they just have? Now you'd have to deal with the politics of it. That would be interesting. And if you ask me, if we was to do an X-Men movie all over, I would just start from back in the day when they first came out, and I would just call it mutants. I wouldn't even. And Xavier will show up in it. I wouldn't even deal with the first class. I'll just deal with the idea of mutants. Then I'd go get into the first teams and all of that. But people want to get to Wolverine. They already talked about Wolverine and Hulk having a movie together. That's the rumor mill. I don't know if that's 100% sure. Like I said again, for you to do that, if Wolverine is running around now, then that means Magneto's been around. Magneto would already made a move already. Like I said, where do you start this from? You starting this from the apex of mutants, or you starting from the first team of X-Men? Either way, you're gonna have to explain where were mutants this whole time the MCU's been running around with their first superhuman what is it, programs that they were doing with the government, this, that, and the third. I mean, like I said, and then you're already building a TV universe. You're expanding the universe so wide with not one concept of mutants ever being around. Like I said, you're gonna sacrifice a lot of X-Men lore just to wedge them in, or you're gonna deal with what Fox dealt with. A lot of continuity errors. And I don't think that for someone who's interwoven it so well to make this universe, you want to complicate it and convolute it so much more because you really want X-Men to be in it, then you may sacrifice your universe just to get what you want. And they've already discussed it. There's already been articles about, if you look at Endgame, there's a lot of holes that's being left because of Endgame wanted to do time travel and all this other stuff. And at some point, even some of the writers said, we just thought it would look cool. It does look cool. And you had a lot of time to get away with it. But now you've opened it up now. So now you've got to address these holes. Unless you don't mind moving forward with just being like how X-Men was. Hey, this is continuity. We be damned. This is what we're doing. And that could work too. But I'm just saying they built a house based on intricacy. Don't sacrifice what you made your name on just because you want to inject all this other stuff. You may end up you may mess up your own franchise. But that's all I got to say on to that. What I wanted to move along to was certain things in the article that I want to read off real quick about certain things they said going past that. Now I'm not one quote out of that article that I would like to read is one of the creators actually quoted for saying, "I'm not opposed to seeing the classic characters," she continued. And like any diehard fan, there's an excitement in seeing new takes on those characters. But I confess that my focus is more wanting to see all the incredibly cool stuff / characters we haven't gotten to see yet, instead of seeing new takes on what's already been seen. I want to see a Laura Wolverine. I want to see Armor and Magic. I'd like to see Storm get a real story. She's so fascinating and was so underserved in the films. Obviously, what I'd like to see most of all is Rogue and Gambit on the screen together, flirting and fighting as they are meant to be. Also, there's another quote in here I found pretty cool too, which touches on a lot of the things that I was saying. Oh shoot! I think I read that off backwards. Let me do this again. I always felt the movie sidelined the women to an absurd degree, he told Polygon, and this is on the Polygon. The X-Men have the strongest roster of female heroes in comics, but the movies never gave characters like Storm, Rogue, Kitty, Jubilee, Emma, or Psylocke their due, and never tapped into characters like Ilyana, Dazzler, Monet, or Danny. It's not the X-Men to me if the women aren't front and center. Thompson felt the same way. I don't want to dismiss Professor Xavier, Magneto, and Wolverine in their importance to the X mythos. She said, but we've had literally 2 decades of those men being the wheel upon which all X-Men film stories turn, and and this is that one cuts off. Excuse me. So that one cuts off. But for the most part, I do understand what she was trying to say in that. And my point to you is, in just reading off these quotes, albeit a little out of order, I think one thing is, women, a lot of them don't have a lot of stories to tell. Like I said, and I love what she said, solo stories. X-Men, to be honest, a lot of these characters should have solo stories. And the fact that they should have solo stories to develop these characters, like they said, there's so many characters that never got a shot. We've done the Magneto and Xavier thing, and I think that's the spine. I don't think you could navigate away from it. That's why I would start with a mutant film and bring Xavier into it near the end, if we're going to start off, so at least we can see the development of mutants, how they came out, their civil rights movement, everything that they went through. I think that would be the better way of going with it, to start fresh. You set a nice new bed, you can start you can set the stage in the rules in which they all have, and the parameters in which they have to work in. Then you could go branch out. Now you're doing something a little bit different. Now, if you want to start from like giant size X-Men, where we don't have to start from the core 4, we could say the core 4 has existed already, because we're starting from giant size, and then we could go right into it and we can start building off of them. But again, once you put Wolverine, it becomes a Wolverine show. Again, that's why I do think that the best way to start off with, especially if you want to start off with female characters, you could start off with a Storm movie, from her being the Weather Witch from back in the day when she was a child, and how she evolved and ends up landing into New York. You could do one just based on Cyclops. Why not? Cyclops has been so underdeveloped in the cinematic universe. We should actually, this is a time where we can actually develop marginalized characters and make them their own Wolverine, in terms of make them have their own story onto its own. Then they get into the team. We have a good moment in which we could do something we never done before and not navigate away from X-Men. Your take?
I mean, like I said, I don't know if like you said, some characters don't deserve a solo movie. I don't know if the public, I don't know if I'd be interested in a Storm movie, a Gambit movie, all these other movies. I don't know if I'd be interested in that. I mean, obviously, it really all depends on. But then again, I said the same thing about Black Widow, and then I saw the trailer, and I can't wait to see it.
And you're saying the same thing about X-Men, as long as they basically, it seemed like what you were saying with the X-Men, as long as they write it well. I mean, I'm here for it.
I mean,
so you can say that with anything, but that's why I'm saying I want to get away from saying you can say that with anything, unless that's just your stance, and then I could walk with it.
Yeah, this is kind of my stance on it. Like I said, I think that like I said, I don't have a problem with the MCU taking over. I think the point of you buying Fox and acquiring all their toys was because you were going to play with the toys. Like, you know what I mean? I think that was part of it.
I don't think suggesting it being another universe or has anything to do with not playing with it. Clearly, you're going to play with it. The question is do you play with it in the MCU as it stands?
Yeah, I think it can be done. I think it can be done. I don't even think it's going to be that complicated. I really don't. I think I don't even think you need to start from the beginning of Mutants. I don't even think you got to do that.
Well, I said that you should do that. You should do
No,
that. I say
you
you
could.
should do. No, I'm not. So I could be clear. I say you should do that if they had their own universe.
Right. Okay. So, and I think that if they don't have their own universe, and we're talking years out, let's say you decide that we're bringing in. Now, the question is, are you recasting or are you using the same exact characters?
I mean, what do you mean recasting? Or you mean the same actors, or are you recasting the lineup?
Actors,
or you talking about the characters itself? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the characters and the actors. Like, if you want to do an X-Men movie and you have Magneto, like, they don't need to really. Well, I like what Fassbender was doing. I like what McAvoy was doing. You know what? Are we just using them? You know what I mean? Like, I do you? And it really depends on that. Because are we recasting, or are we just? We're just throwing you in the MCU now. We kind of already like the performance you guys was doing already. We're just throwing you in.
Well, I mean, paying attention to Kevin Feige, I would assume he's going to rebuff everything. He doesn't seem like he likes to take anybody else's shit. Like,
right,
I mean...
And that's kind of what I was thinking, too. But again, I also think that, once you figure out whether you're rebooting or, whatever, I think you're just going to insert them. I think you're going to insert them. I think a smart way to insert them is just throw one of them randomly, one of your MCU movies.
What?
Throw one of them randomly.
Was it say that again?
The same way. Matter of fact, you had mutants in the MCU anyway.
No, you didn't.
Didn't you have Quicksilver?
I knew you was gonna say that. They never said they were mutants. You don't remember they got their powers from the stone. That's how they got.
I know, but again, you could do that. You can insert them. You can literally insert.
But they don't. They're not mutants in that though. That's okay, what I'm saying. As it stands, they're not mutants.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be them particularly. You can literally insert a mutant in a movie and just talk about how they're a mutant. You can literally pick. You could literally pick. Name a mutant, Rogue or Gambit or whoever, and you can have them in. I'm just throwing it out there. Doctor Strange 3. And insert them and just mention how they're a mutant, and there you go. That's all it takes. It's really not going to be that complicated. It's really not. You could literally recast Wolverine and insert him in any MCU movie as just as a quick 10-minute, oh my God, that's the new Wolverine. And all you need to know right then and there, Wolverine makes one mention of the X-Men, and that's it. Coming soon 3 years later, X-Men movie. It ain't. I do not even see the insertion hard at all. I don't see it hard at all. You pick one character, Wolverine, which is the most popular, and you insert him in an MCU movie, and he don't even have to be the star. He just has to be like, matter of fact, just the same way he was in the Apocalypse at the end, where he had that little 5-10 minute scene. You could damn near have him in the same thing in an MCU movie. You could, and for a 10-minute scene, the crowd goes wild. He makes a mention of, the X-Men, and I got this Miss Professor X is calling me. He's out the movie. Captain America goes on his next adventure, but the crowd has already went wild that we saw the new Wolverine coming, 2025 X-Men movie. That's all you needed. X-Men movie comes, all the characters are there. I don't see this hard at all. I really don't. Matter of fact, you can recast Magneto and you can make him the bad guy in one of your MCU movies. Or one of the sub-bad guys. You know how like Spider-Man had Doc Octopus, but there was the Green Goblin. And Magneto talks about what would happen to mutants. And there you go. Coming 3 years from now, the X-Men movie, first MCU X-Men movie. We already saw Magneto in, the first Fantastic Four movie. We saw Magneto. There you go. Now, we talked about Storm and Black Panther 2. We didn't even got to see Storm. All we got to do is mention her. All we got to do is T'Challa mention her. Hey, whatever happened to that girl, the one that you was in love with, with the white hair that used to control the elements, Yeah, she's offering. She left Africa because of her powers, and she's at this special school for gifted children. Oh, so he doesn't mention it. That's all it got to do is be mentioned. She even had a sea storm. Let T'Challa mention the African girl with the white hair who has the powers. Whatever happened to T'Challa or his mother? Oh, because our powers, we didn't know how to deal with her, but we found we had this special guy named Xavier came and got her because he deals with people that are born with powers. I think they call them mutants. I think in the United States they call them mutants. Okay.
Wait. They never mentioned mutants before. That's the problem. I think in the United States they never did.
But I'm just saying, I'm just saying they don't have to.
I'm just saying even, but that's the conundrum you have. How can you mention a gift for, again, that's what I'm saying. That, like, I think that's my issue is, unless you're saying mutants just came up out of thin air today, or they're just having their coming out party, you just mentioning like they've always been around.
And I guarantee
and no one's and through the Sokovia Awards, there was never no anti-mutant. Hold on. There was no anti-mutant rhetoric. There was none of that, because that's kind of the core of the X-Men.
And the crowd will follow.
So all right, then you want cheese? That's what I said. You could just do that. Like I said, you could do cheese. I take it serious as a real film. If we want to do popcorn cheese, that's what's up.
I am taking it, but I also understand that the people that made these movies big, most of them are not comic book fans. They are not going to care about continuity and all that stuff. I guarantee you they won't. They won't. The MCU is not this big billion dollar machine because of comic book fans.
No one said that. Again, you're missing the point.
You can easily. No, I'm not missing the point. What I'm telling you.
Oh, maybe you're missing my point. But
I'm not missing your point. I'm saying it can easily be inserted. And all those questions that you're asking, the majority of the public is not going to ask. They're going to follow it. You're going to have that percentage, that 25% like you, that's going to be like, damn, you never mentioned humans before. And all this other stuff, all the stuff that you're mentioning, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people like you. The vast majority are not going to ask those questions.
Cool. I mean, again, and I'll leave with this, and it's not even about getting the last word, because it's all about, again, all you're doing is restating what I'm already saying. You're gonna have to divorce yourself from a lot of X-Men lore to get away with that. That's all I'm saying. And if you're saying, and if your argument, the only argument out of that I can hear is the fan, the general audience wouldn't care anyway because they don't read the book. Now, if that's your argument, that would make sense, but that doesn't take away what I said. You're going to have to divorce yourself from a whole lot of X-Men lore just to do it.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I'm saying. And with it is a lot of history, a lot of storylines that you'd have to, even though they're already rewriting a lot of these are not out of the book. My point being is that in all things considering, you could write anything to make it dope and good. So even if you divorce a lot of the lore, you can still make it great, make a great movie. But then again, you're gonna still walk into the what do we love a lot? Man of Steel, excellent superhero movie, great film. A lot of people says that's not Superman. You may come across those type of issues, and as much as you like to say that it don't matter the general audience, the vocal minority has tanked films. They ruined the Snyderverse. This is why we're coming back to it now. You know what I'm saying? We've heard the vocal majority force people off of projects that could have probably been good. Like Scarlett Johansson didn't do the transgender film. Great actress. Might have been a great film. Have we heard anybody, the transgender person that's going to take on the role? No, that movie is gone. No one's talking about that movie. You know what I'm saying? So
and I get what
again,
you're saying.
so
But
all I'm
even with
saying,
that,
anyone could write something good, but again, it goes back to you divorce a lot of the lore. And
but
if
then
you divorce,
we
and
do that
unless you're
anyway.
saying the lore might not matter, you could reshape and rewrite your own variation of X-Men. And yeah, you can. I mean, anybody can
We
do
did
that
it. We did it.
realistically doing.
We did it. X-Men 1.
I
X-Men 1
mean,
is devoid of the history.
no, it's still
X-Men
no,
1.
but still, no, it's not. Nah,
Excuse me. The first
I
Wolverine.
vehemently
Is
disagree.
Wolverine part of the first X-Men team? No. No. The first X-Men movie with Wolverine, Storm, Hugh Jackman. That's not the first team. You completely skipped the whole history.
Again,
But you did. I'm
no.
saying.
I mean, if you let me explain, in any movie they were gonna always rewrite it to make it look right for the screen. I said X-Men lore, the backstory, the spine, everything that makes X-Men X-Men. What makes X-Men X-Men isn't just like Cyclops, the 5 people that you want to pick, because that's not X-Men for everyone. When I was reading X-Men, Wolverine was already on the team. But they had a history. Again, even in that movie, there was a history. That wasn't the first day that where did they started X-Men from? Not from them being in class. It started back from what is it? The concentration camps. There was a history that led up to it. They were already established. Mystique didn't just realize she had powers. Storm didn't just realize she was already in America. We knew she was from Africa. Technically speaking, they say in the comics she was born here and went back home because one of her parents was American, her other parent was Kenyan. Then she moved over there when she was young and grew up there. Technically speaking, she was born in America, but that's neither here nor there. You could just even in that, you could say, hey, Storm was born in Africa. I didn't. That doesn't mean that you changed up X-Men lore. Yeah, you might have changed up certain story plot points and whatnot, but that doesn't change the lore. The lore of X-Men is mutants being hated by human beings. There is no indication of that at all in the MCU as it stands. So unless you're making their coming out party now, and the X gene is just starting to come out now, you divorce yourself from a lot of the lore. Yeah, you could say, this is what I'm saying. We could say X-Men, if you want to say, oh, hey, they saying in passing, mutants. Yeah, mutants. We're around. Oh, okay. You can't have Sentinels now because people could not have known they even existed. So you have to now begin the hate of humans for X-Men. And then now you'd have to start off the X gene, or if you're saying the X gene has always been around, I don't know when no one's noticed them going through, because part of the lore is when they hit puberty, it happens. Then people know who they are. People fear them. That's the X-Men lore. People hate what they do not understand. You literally have to start the X gene popping up now to have that as its core base. Or you divorce that and just to have mutants. We say, hey, mutants were always around. And then you don't have that. And then you have to start the hate for mutants to super, and it gets a little convoluted, because why are you worried about them when you already had superheroes running around for the past 15 years already? So why are you afraid of mutants? You got this juiced up Captain America already. You see, it opens up a lot of questions. That's all I'm saying. Like, you literally have to redo the lore for it to work in their universe. Because why would people have an issue with mutants when you have the Hulk walking around already? Where would the fear of mutants come from? The Sokovia? That's what I'm talking about. You'd really divorce yourself from the lore of who X-Men were. X-Men were like the black people to white people, and black. I mean, we already know about it. This is the civil rights movement all over again. But black people always around. You gotta say, hey, there's no. It's almost like saying, hey, Wolverine takes a. I've always been black, and then no one noticed that black people were popping up. Like no one noticed this already, or they're just popping up today. You know what I'm saying? And now you could do the lore of humans hating them. But if you already had the Black Hulk looking like a black man, then it'd be like, well, why are we afraid of them? But we weren't really afraid of this motherfucker who was really leveling city. Like it would really not. You see what I'm saying now? It's like, how are you afraid of this black guy who can't do what the Hulk does? And the Hulk been running around tearing shit up, looking like a black guy. Now we hate black people. But what about the Hulk the whole time? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. So you lose that civil rights thing that's the core of the X-Men. Them being the next genetic launch from humanity. If you're already showing that people are already making their superhero serum already, and they already had these supers running around saving the world and destroying it at the same time, then why would anyone give a damn about an X gene? That's my point. Because that is X-Men. People hating them for who they are. Hating them because the mismanagement of their powers. Because this is who they are. I didn't choose this. I don't jump in a suit. I didn't get hit with, this is who I am. That's a deep, intense story. You don't just shoehorn that. Unless you're just gonna make it you divorce yourself a lot of X-Men lore. Again, like, you can't escape it. For them to be in the MCU as it stands, you'd have to divorce yourself from a lot of things that come out of X-Men lore. And unless your argument is that the majority audience wouldn't give a damn because they never read the book, then I'd say, hey, maybe you'd have a point. But again, it doesn't take away what I'm saying. You'd literally have to divorce yourself from a lot of X-Men lore. And I'm not talking, when I say X-Men lore, I don't mean the teams. You could do that with any of the teams. The X-Men are offshoot of the idea of the mutants. And if you have a muddled idea of the mutants and what made them want to be X-Men, then you kind of lose a lot of the lore. Then they'll just be superheroes with powers for all of that. Why don't we just say, hey, Wolverine just had, you make your own version of Wolverine. He had the serum, and they put adamantium in him, and this is just how Wolverine is. Storm, she got her powers from one of the crystals, if you will. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing.
I mean, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that you can't write an interest in X-Men. You lose a lot of X-Men lore, and then you find yourself in the same possible position that a lot of people have, that even most of the naysayers that hate Man of Steel, if you really get in their ass, they'll be like, well, it's a good movie, but it's not a good Superman movie. Then you're going to have that issue. And you can say, hey, that's just a small demographic. You see, that small demographic ruined the franchise. Damn near ruined the franchise. That's what I'm saying. And that might not go over well in narrative unless you make them a whole other kind of X-Men. And that's what I'm saying. Like, then it'd be like, you finally got the X-Men characters, and when you finally could actually do the X-Men lore, just to force them in the MCU, you just got rid of a lot of X-Men lore because we had to have them in the MCU. Then are you serving the character, or are you serving the MCU? I'll leave it to you to have your final thoughts on that. That's all I was saying.
Like I said, I'm not disagreeing. I just think that, like I said, for me, like I said, the original question was, what do I feel about the MCU and, you know, the X-Men and MCU? And like I said, I'll stick with my original. I don't see an issue with it. I welcome them coming in, and how they introduce them, you know, we'll go down that road and we'll see what happens then. But I really have no issue with them being in the MCU. I think there is a way to introduce them and keep some of the lore. I think that there's a way you can do it. Do I know the way? I don't. But I don't think that there's a problem with. But to be honest, I don't think there's a problem with anyone being in the MCU. I really don't. I think as long as you have a plan and you execute it right and you make a good film, I get it. And I get what you're saying about the whole lore of it. And I still think you can keep some of the lore too. I think it can be done. I think it can be done. You know, I know that what you say is, you know, I think that especially when it comes to movies, we play around with it so much. Like I said, even with X-Men, yeah, the lore is them being like the black people. But again, we watched the first X-Men film. That was the original team. Even First Class wasn't really the original team. We keep playing around with it.
But I think the lore was the same.
But I said the lore, but I say, but the fact that we can keep playing around with it, I think there's a way it can be done. And I don't think it's going to make things, I don't think it's that complicated. I really don't. But we'll just leave it at that.
All right. Say no more.
We'll just leave it at that.
And the haircut. What were your thoughts on the haircut?
I did see his picture.
And it's